So, you want to be frozen after you die. Frozen, drained of blood, filled with antifreeze, cooled to negative 321 degrees Fahrenheit, sealed inside a steel cylinder in a warehouse in Scottsdale, Arizona, and left there, upside down, in liquid nitrogen, until someone in the future figures out how to bring you back. Right now, about 743 people on Earth have done exactly that. That's fewer people than have climbed Everest in a single season. Roughly the same number as have been to space. 2 companies in the United States will sell you this. The expensive one charges $200,000. The cheap one charges $28,000. And neither one of them can tell you if it works, because no frozen human has ever been revived. Not once. Not partially. Not even close. So what are you actually buying? What does it cost? All in, from the moment you sign up to the moment you're floating in a tank. Why is one company 7 times more expensive than the other? And what happens to your body if the company that promised to keep you frozen forever simply runs out of money? That last question is not hypothetical. It's already happened. Let's start with the 2 options you have. Option 1, the Alcor Life Extension Foundation in Scottsdale, Arizona. Founded in 1972. Currently storing somewhere north of 227 patients, including the brain of baseball legend Ted Williams and the body of Bitcoin pioneer Hal Finney. The youngest patient in the building is a 2-year-old girl from Thailand who died of brain cancer. Alcor offers 2 products, whole body preservation, $200,000, or what they call neuropreservation, $80,000. Neuropreservation means they keep your head, just your head. The logic, if you can call it that, is that the brain is the only organ that stores who you are, and future technology will presumably be able to grow you a new body from your DNA. The head is stored in a steel cylinder filled with liquid nitrogen. The body, if you opted out of whole body, is cremated and the ashes returned to your family. Option 2, the Cryonics Institute in Clinton Township, Michigan. Founded in 1976 by a man named Robert Ettinger, who is generally credited with starting the entire cryonics movement with a book he published in 1962. The Cryonics Institute has over 250 patients. Their price for whole body preservation is $28,000. They do not offer the head-only option. That is not a typo. One company charges $200,000. The other charges $28,000. For what is, on its face, the same thing. A body in a tank of liquid nitrogen in a building in the United States. So what accounts for the difference? 2 things. First, Alcor includes standby and transport. They have a team called DART, the Deployment and Recovery Team, on call around the clock. When you die, wherever you are in the continental United States, Alcor sends a team to your location. They begin cooling your body and performing initial preservation procedures before you're even on a plane to Arizona. This is the part they say matters most, because the faster they get to you after your heart stops, the less damage your brain accumulates. Every minute you're warm and dead, cells are dying. The Cryonics Institute does not include this. Their $28,000 covers the preservation procedure once your body arrives at their facility in Michigan. Getting it there is your problem. You need to arrange a funeral director to prepare and ship your body. You can contract a third-party company called Suspended Animation to handle standby and transport, but that costs roughly $60,000 on top of the $28,000. By the time you add it all up, a full-service Cryonics Institute arrangement runs somewhere north of $100,000. Second, the money after death. Of Alcor's $200,000, a portion goes into a patient care trust, a separate fund designed to generate enough investment returns to pay for your liquid nitrogen indefinitely. The idea is that even if Alcor as an organization struggles financially, the trust keeps the lights on and the tanks cold. At the Cryonics Institute, of the $28,000, roughly $8,000 covers the actual preservation procedure. The remaining $20,000 goes into long-term investments, and the interest is supposed to pay for your upkeep forever. Forever is doing a lot of work in that sentence. We'll come back to it. Now here's the part that makes this business genuinely interesting. Almost nobody pays the sticker price out of pocket. About 80% of cryonics members at Alcor fund their preservation with a life insurance policy. The math works like this. You take out a term life insurance policy with a face value of $200,000. You name Alcor as the beneficiary. Your monthly premium, depending on your age and health, might be somewhere between $30 and $100 a month. When you die, the insurance company cuts a check directly to Alcor, and the preservation is funded. This is why Alcor's CEO has gone on record saying that about 80% of their members are middle class. You do not need $200,000 in the bank. You need a life insurance policy and the discipline to keep paying premiums for the rest of your life. Annual membership dues at Alcor are calculated by your age times $15. If you sign up at 30, you pay $450 a year. At 50, $750. On top of that, there's a comprehensive member standby fee of $200 a year. At the Cryonics Institute, a lifetime membership is a one-time fee of $1,250. Annual membership is $120 a year. So let's price out the full lifetime cost for a 30-year-old American who signs up today and dies at 80. Alcor. Life insurance. Premiums for 50 years at roughly $50 a month. Call it $30,000 total. Membership dues averaging around $800 a year for 50 years, another $40,000. Standby fees, $10,000. All in, roughly $80,000 paid over your lifetime, on top of the $200,000 the insurance company pays when you die. Cryonics Institute. Lifetime membership, $1,250. Life insurance for a $100,000 policy, maybe $20 a month for 50 years, $12,000 total. Funeral director and transport, another $3,000 to $6,000. All in, roughly $20,000 out of pocket. Those are the numbers. Now let's talk about what actually happens to your body, because this is where most people's understanding stops and the reality gets significantly stranger. When your heart stops, you are not frozen. Freezing is the enemy. If you take a human body and simply lower its temperature below zero, ice crystals form inside every cell. Those crystals are sharp. They shred cell membranes. They destroy tissue structure. They turn your brain into something closer to a bag of crushed ice than a preserved organ. If anyone ever froze you the way you freeze a steak, there would be nothing left to revive. What modern cryonics companies do instead is called vitrification. After your heart stops and you're pronounced legally dead, the team begins cooling your body and simultaneously pumping a cryoprotectant solution through your circulatory system. These chemicals are, in simple terms, biological antifreeze. They bond with the water molecules in your cells, so those molecules cannot organize into crystals. Instead of freezing into ice, your tissues solidify into a glass-like state. Think of it as the difference between a window pane and a tray of ice cubes. One preserves the structure behind it, the other shatters it. The body is then cooled slowly, past -120 degrees Celsius, and eventually placed in a dewar, which is essentially a giant steel thermos filled with liquid nitrogen at -196 Celsius. The dewars require no electricity, they just need to be topped off with liquid nitrogen periodically as a small amount evaporates. That is the product, a glass-like body in a steel tank in a building in the desert, maintained by a non-profit with 8 full-time employees and a trust fund, waiting for a future that may never arrive. And now the question you've been waiting for. Does it work? The honest answer is, we don't know. And we won't know for a very long time. No human being has ever been revived from cryopreservation. No large mammal has. No organ from a human body has been vitrified, thawed, and transplanted successfully. But here's the part the skeptics don't usually mention. In 2023, researchers at the University of Minnesota published a study in Nature, communications showing they had vitrified rat kidneys, stored them for up to 100 days, rewarmed them, and transplanted them into living rats. The kidneys worked, the rats survived. The key breakthrough was something called nanowarming. The problem with thawing a vitrified organ is that if you warm the outside faster than the inside, the temperature difference causes cracking. The Minnesota team solved this by distributing iron oxide nanoparticles throughout the organ's blood vessels. When placed in a magnetic field, the nanoparticles generate heat from within, warming the entire organ simultaneously. That is a real result, published in one of the most respected scientific journals in the world. It is also a rat kidney. A rat kidney is not a human brain. The gap between the two is enormous, and no one in the field pretends otherwise. The cryonics bet is not that the science works today. The bet is that you'd rather be in a tank with a small chance than in the ground with none. Now, let's talk about what happens when the bet goes wrong. In the late 1960s and early 1970s, a man named Robert Nelson ran the Cryonics Society of California out of a cemetery in Chatsworth, Los Angeles County. Nelson had frozen several people in capsules stored in an underground vault at the cemetery. The capsules required a vacuum pump to maintain insulation. Without the pump, the liquid nitrogen would boil off in days. Nelson went on a trip. He left a groundskeeper in charge of refilling the nitrogen. The pump broke. The groundskeeper didn't catch it in time. The liquid nitrogen evaporated. 9 human bodies stored in those capsules thawed and decomposed. When a reporter finally visited the vault on the morning of June 10th, 1979, the smell was so overwhelming it was physically disabling. Every single person Nelson had frozen was gone. Not metaphorically, biologically. Their families had been paying for preservation they weren't receiving. The Chatsworth disaster is the single worst event in the history of cryonics. And the reason it matters today is not because it could happen again in exactly the same way. Modern facilities are vastly better. The reason it matters is because it demonstrated the core vulnerability of the entire model. You are not buying a product. You are buying a promise. The promise that an organization will exist, remain funded, remain competent, and remain committed to maintaining your body at negative 321 degrees Fahrenheit. Forever. Not for 10 years, not for 50. Forever. Or at least until revival technology exists, which could be 100 years from now, or 1,000. No company in the history of the United States has lasted 1,000 years. Most don't last 50. You are placing a bet that a nonprofit in Scottsdale, Arizona, with 8 employees and a trust fund, will outlast every corporation, every government agency, and every financial system currently operating on Earth. And even if the organization survives, your relatives might not cooperate. There are documented cases of families getting tired of paying for a frozen relative and requesting the body back. One facility offered to cut off a man's head and store it for free to save costs. The family declined. The body was thawed, submerged in formaldehyde, and buried. Then there's Ted Williams. When the greatest hitter in baseball history died on July the 5th, 2002, at the age of 83, his body was flown by private jet to Alcor's facility in Scottsdale. And here is where it gets ugly. According to his will, Williams wanted to be cremated. His ashes were supposed to be scattered off the coast of Florida. But his son, John Henry, and his younger daughter, Claudia, produced what became known as the Napkin Pact, a handwritten agreement, literally signed on a napkin, stating that the family had agreed to be put into biostasis together. His eldest daughter, Bobby Jo, sued. She said the consent was forged. Lab analysis couldn't prove that definitively. Bobby Jo eventually dropped the case when the legal fees became unmanageable. But the real damage came later. A former Alcor chief operating officer named Larry Johnson went public with allegations about what happened inside the facility. According to his account and a subsequent investigation by Sports Illustrated, Williams' head had been separated from his body. It had been shaved, drilled with holes, and accidentally cracked as many as 10 times. Staff had taken photographs. 2 years after Ted Williams died, his son John Henry died of leukemia. He was cryopreserved and joined his father at Alcor, per the napkin agreement. Alcor has disputed many of Johnson's claims, but the damage to the industry was severe, and the core of the story is something no amount of technology can fix. The moment you are cryopreserved, you have no legal standing. You are dead. You cannot sue. You cannot object. You cannot verify that the terms of your agreement are being honored. Your body is in the hands of people you will never meet, governed by contracts you can no longer enforce, in a legal category that has no precedent. So let's run the final math. The optimistic scenario. You sign up at 30, you pay your premiums, You die at 80. Alcor sends a team. The vitrification goes well. Your body is placed in a tank that is maintained for the next 200 years. In 2026, some form of technology exists that can reverse vitrification, repair whatever killed you, and restore consciousness. You wake up. You are alive in a world you do not recognize, where every person you have ever loved has been dead for generations. You own nothing. You know no one. Your skills are obsolete. Your money, if any survived, has been eaten by inflation or seized by an estate that closed out a century ago. You are, in every meaningful sense, a newborn. The pessimistic scenario: you pay for 50 years, you die, the preservation goes fine. 20 years later, the trust fund runs short because the stock market did something the actuaries didn't model. Alcor sends a letter to your next of kin asking for additional funding. Your grandchildren, who never met you, decline. Your tank is decommissioned. You are thawed and cremated, which is what your will said in the first place, minus $200,000 and 50 years of premiums. The realistic scenario, which is the one nobody in this industry talks about, is somewhere in between. You are preserved competently. The organization survives. Revival technology advances, but not in a straight line. The science gets close enough to generate real excitement, then stalls. New techniques emerge for kidneys, then livers, then maybe a rabbit brain. But a whole human, with intact memories, with a continuous sense of self, that's a problem so far beyond current medicine that the honest answer is nobody alive today can tell you whether it's 50 years away or impossible. And that's the product. Not immortality, not even a probability. A non-zero chance, stored in liquid nitrogen for the price of a modest house. The first man ever frozen is still in a tank in Scottsdale. His name is James Bedford. He was a psychology professor at the University of California. He died of kidney cancer on January 12, 1967. He's been in there for 59 years. He was born in 1893. If cryonics works, James Bedford will have outlived every human being who has ever lived. If it doesn't, he's been a popsicle in the desert since before the moon landing. Either way, he can't tell you which one it is, and that is exactly what $200,000 buys.